Em thích chiếc váy này nhất.
Váy đẹp thật, em thử không?
Em đi thử, anh chọn vest đi.
Được, anh xem chiếc này nhé.
Hai bạn cần em tư vấn gì không ạ? Em chọn váy cưới này nha anh.
Anh cũng đồng ý.
Dạ, để em lấy size cho hai bạn.
Cảm ơn
chị.
What if a simple New Year's meal could quietly change two lives forever? On the third day of spring, beneath golden sunlight at Huyen's farm, a heartfelt wish from Mrs. Sam gently pushes Huyen and Day toward the future they have long dreamed of. Blushing yet overjoyed, they reveal their plan to take wedding photos the very next morning, an intimate first step toward marriage. From a tender family blessing to the magical moment of choosing a wedding gown and suit, their love blossoms into a promise, marking the beginning of a lifetime they are finally ready to embrace together. On the third day of the Lunar New Year, Huyen's farm shimmered under a gentle veil of golden sunlight, as if spring itself had chosen this place to linger a little longer. The air carried the faint sweetness of blooming mustard flowers and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed tea drifting from the wooden house at the heart of the land. Chickens clucked cheerfully near the fence, and the young leaves on the fruit trees glistened with the last traces of morning dew. Inside, a warm New Year's feast had been carefully arranged, steaming dishes laid out with love, red envelopes tucked neatly beside porcelain bowls, laughter rising and falling like a soft melody of family reunion. It was meant to be a simple kaisuan meal, a celebration to welcome luck and prosperity, but no one expected that it would also become a turning point in Huyen and De's love story. As the family settled around the table, Day sat beside Huyen, their shoulders almost touching, their fingers occasionally brushing under the table in shy affection. Huyen wore a pale pink sweater that made her cheeks look even rosier, while Day could not stop stealing glances at her whenever she smiled at his mother. Across from them, Mrs. Sam, De's gentle but strong-willed mother, watched the young couple with eyes full of quiet reflection. She had seen the way they worked side by side on the farm, how Day carried heavy baskets without complaint when Huyen looked tired, how Huyen prepared herbal tea for Day whenever he caught a cold during the rainy season. She had witnessed their love not through grand declarations, but through small, steady acts of devotion. And perhaps that was why her heart felt so certain. Halfway through the meal, Mrs. Sam gently set her chopsticks down. The soft clink against the porcelain bowl seemed louder than usual, drawing everyone's attention. She cleared her throat lightly, her voice calm but filled with emotion as she spoke. She told them that spring was the season of beginnings, of planting seeds for future harvests, and she believed it was also the perfect time to plant the seed of marriage. She confessed that she had been waiting, hoping, and quietly praying to see Huyen become her daughter-in-law. She wanted to prepare the wedding, to sew lucky charms into the bride's dress, to watch the two of them stand together before friends and relatives as husband and wife. Her words were not demanding, they were tender, wrapped in the deep longing of a mother who simply wished to see her son settled and happy. Silence followed her confession, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that carries weight, heavy with love, surprise, and unspoken gratitude. Huyen felt her cheeks burn as warmth rushed to her face. She lowered her eyes shyly, her fingers tightening around the edge of her bowl. Day, on the other hand, instinctively reached for her hand beneath the table, squeezing it gently as if to say, "I'm here." His heart pounded, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that the future he had dreamed of with Huyen was no longer a distant hope. The silence that followed Mrs. Sam's heartfelt wish did not last long, yet it lingered just enough to make the moment sacred. Dee felt the warmth of Huyen's trembling fingers in his hand, and in that gentle squeeze, he understood that this was no longer a dream they whispered about under the starlit sky of the farm. This was real. This was their future unfolding before them. He lifted his gaze to meet his mother's tear-bright eyes, then turned to Huyen, whose lashes were lowered shyly, her lips curved in a soft, nervous smile. The golden afternoon light streamed through the wooden window, resting upon her face like a quiet blessing. Something inside him settled with certainty. Taking a steady breath, Dee straightened slightly in his seat. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried both excitement and reverence. He told his mother that he and Huyen had already been planning something special. They had not wanted to rush or speak too soon, but they had known in their hearts that this year would be different. Then, with a gentle squeeze of Huyen's hand, he announced that the very next morning they would go to take their wedding photos. It was not a grand ceremony yet, not the wedding itself, but it was their first official step, a promise captured in images that would last a lifetime. Mrs. Sam's eyes widened in surprise before softening with overwhelming joy. Her lips trembled as she let out a small laugh that turned into a sigh of relief. For a mother, there is no greater comfort than knowing her child has chosen love with courage. She reached across the table and placed her weathered hand over theirs, her palm warm from years of working under the sun. She said she was proud of them, proud that they did not wait for perfect conditions or wealth, but chose to build a life together with sincerity and determination. Her blessing fell upon them like spring rain nourishing young crops. Beside Dee, Huyen felt her heart swell almost painfully. She had imagined this conversation many times in quiet moments, while watering vegetables at dawn, while folding laundry in the fading light of dusk, but reality felt far more beautiful than her imagination. She looked at Mrs. Sam and saw not just her future mother-in-law, but a woman who had accepted her completely. Gratitude shimmered in her eyes as she promised softly that she would cherish Dee, that she would care for this family with all her heart. Her voice trembled, but her resolve was steady. The rest of the meal unfolded in laughter and light teasing. Mrs. Sam began talking about auspicious dates and traditional rituals, about inviting neighbors and decorating the farm with bright lanterns. Dee playfully nudged Huyen, whispering that tomorrow she would officially become the most beautiful bride in the entire countryside. She nudged him back, pretending to scold him for exaggerating, yet her smile betrayed her happiness. Outside, the wind rustled through the fields as if applauding their decision. The farm that had witnessed their quiet courtship now seemed to celebrate alongside them. In that small wooden house, filled with sunlight and hope, a new chapter had begun, not just with words, but with action. Tomorrow, they would step into a studio, stand side by side, and let the camera capture. The next morning arrived with a softness that felt almost ceremonial, as if the dawn itself understood the importance of the day. A pale pink glow stretched across the horizon above Huyen's farm, and a light mist hovered over the fields they had tended together for years. Huyen stood by her window for a moment before leaving, watching the familiar rows of vegetables shimmer under the early sunlight. Today, she was not simply a farmer's daughter stepping into another day of work. She was a bride-to-be walking toward a promise. Her heart fluttered with anticipation, equal parts excitement and sweet nervousness. Dee arrived at the gate earlier than planned, dressed neatly, his hair carefully styled in a way that made him look both mature and boyishly hopeful. When Huyen stepped outside, wearing a simple white dress before changing into her wedding gown later, he paused as though time had briefly forgotten to move. There was something luminous about her that morning. Perhaps it was the knowledge of what they were about to do, or perhaps it was simply love revealing itself more boldly than ever. They exchanged shy smiles, the kind that carried years of shared glances, shared struggles, and shared dreams. The bridal studio in the small town was modest but charming, with large glass windows that allowed sunlight to pour in generously. Inside, racks of wedding gowns shimmered in ivory, champagne, and soft blush tones. When Huyen stepped into the fitting room and emerged moments later in a flowing white gown, the world seemed to narrow to a single breathtaking frame. The fabric cascaded around her like gentle waves, hugging her waist before falling gracefully to the floor. A delicate veil rested upon her hair, softening her features and highlighting the sparkle in her eyes. Dee felt his breath catch in his chest. In that instant, he was no longer thinking about photographs or poses. He was imagining her walking toward him on their wedding day, beneath an arch of flowers on the farm. Dee chose a tailored suit in a warm gray tone that complemented Huyen's gown perfectly. When he adjusted his tie and stood beside her before the large mirror, their reflections merged into a vision of the future. They both laughed softly, still a little embarrassed by the grandeur of it all. "We look real," Huyen whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief and joy. Dee nodded, gently brushing a strand of hair away from her face, telling her she was more beautiful than any blossom that bloomed on their land. As the photographer began to guide them, their initial stiffness faded into natural intimacy. Dee wrapped an arm around Huyen's waist. She leaned into him instinctively. Their smiles were no longer posed, but genuine, born from shared memories of planting seeds in the rain, repairing fences under the scorching sun, and dreaming of building a home filled with children's laughter. Each click of the camera captured not just elegant outfits, but the quiet resilience of their love. By the time the final photograph was taken, the sun had risen high, illuminating the studio in brilliant gold. Huyen and Dee stood hand in hand, hearts lighter.
Hello, xin chào tất cả các khán giả của kênh Live Single RV. Vậy là câu chuyện của chúng ta ngày hôm nay đã kết thúc tại đây. Trong câu chuyện của chúng ta ngày hôm nay đã kể về nội dung đó chính là việc trong bữa cơm khai xuân của gia đình Huyền đệ thì bà Sam là mẹ của đệ đã rất là mong muốn Huyền và đệ làm đám cưới càng sớm càng tốt. Huyền và đệ thì cũng rất là vui mừng và cũng ngại ngùng thông báo với bà Sam, đó chính là việc cả hai người đã lên kế hoạch đi chụp ảnh cưới và đã hẹn lịch chụp ảnh cưới vào ngày mai. Bà Sam thì hoàn toàn đồng ý với Huyền và đệ và chúc cho hai người đi chụp ảnh cưới có một buổi chụp ảnh cưới thật là vui vẻ và có nhiều bức ảnh đẹp để đời. Mọi tình tiết hấp dẫn về câu chuyện sẽ còn được kể ở các video tiếp theo. Các bạn đừng quên bấm vào nút đăng ký kênh để nhận được thông báo mới nhất về các câu chuyện sẽ được phát sóng hàng ngày trên kênh Live Single RV nhé. Và cũng đừng quên bấm vào giỏ hàng được đính kèm trên video để mua các sản phẩm ủng hộ Huyền và đệ nha. Bye bye.